collectivity that's not based on coercion or peer pressure, that these are, I mean, in a way, it's an affinity group. An Invisible's group is an affinity group. They're, although the way he positions them in the comic is they're pretty much just marginal people who are really pissed off at society and, figure, and in a way it's nihilistic. I mean, you figure, look, we're fucked anyway, so let's at least have fun doing it, or let's at least, it's like, I guess I'm saying, like, if I'm going to go down, I'm not going to go down without a fight. And that's a very common tactic among disenfranchised revolutionaries in general. Like, okay, I've got nothing to lose, so I'm going to throw rocks at the tank.
So do you think they're really marketing their sigils at the disenfranchised, or are they ultimately trying to get those enfranchised and get them to leave the status quo? Yeah,
that is a great question, because honestly, I don't know, because I don't know how. There's no class-based. Although, wait, let me go back. Grant Morrison, coming out of that sort of British punk 1970s chaos sort of origin thing. I mean, I don't know what his background is. I know in England there was the Center for Cultural Studies, I think, where there was an emphasis on working class sort of revolution, and that's what punk was about. And so I think initially they came out of a disenfranchised mindset, maybe, and that changed. But that's a good question.
So do you think there's some kind of Marxist underpinning to all of this to challenge
I don't think so.
Collective culture?
No, because using Marxism as the framework is just like the baseball game analogy. Like, well, you're kind of really just, you're playing cricket now instead of baseball. You still use a bat and a ball, and you still have to go to work and come home and commiserate about the fact that you worked 8 hours and your back is killing you. I don't know, but I mean, collectivity to me, I'm thinking of it more anarchistically and more organically and more smaller too. Is the other thing. I don't think it's a global idea. I think this is a local community idea.
Okay, well, let's talk about some of the other ways that these things are kind of manifesting. So you've got kind of television shows, or you have novels or books or graphic novels in Morrison's case. How do you think these creators of these products are getting the market to finance them, but also have this subversive or transgressive aspect in there too?
Yeah. Well, perhaps it's partly because the people who tend to have the most power and the most authority over media are not really all that attentive. They don't really see a lot of things. I mean, some things can slip under the radar. And, for example, take Promethea as an example by Alan Moore. It's a pretty complicated comic. I mean, especially as you get towards the end. Chances are, I mean, even someone who cares about this stuff, even someone who's really interested in Kabbalah and occultism and stuff, even people like that are not going to catch everything in there anyway. So imagine if an attentive eye is overlooking some things. Imagine what half-assed eyes are doing. Most people in the media look at this is one of the examples I think why Morrison's got it right. There's a lot of things that can go on under the radar because they're looking for certain things. In this case, I think one of the anarchy for the masses idea is to have, is to be collective, but not be sort of embedded within the system to be collective. Like, in other words, we're not forming a non-profit organization. Mm-hmm. We're simply 5 people who are friends or who look like friends, or
right. So they operate under kind of the radar.
Yeah, because it's predictable, and that's to me, I think the greatest triumph of all of these kind of works is that it does sort of dispel us from predictability. It does push us away from doing predictable things.
But do you see there's actually kind of an affinity there with how terrorist groups and terrorist cells work?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I don't think that's an accident that either have functioned that way. It's because it's the only way it's been effective to make change. I mean, you can try to make changes in society through, sort of public organizations, Let's take groups like the NAACP or something, and you develop strength through your numbers, you develop strength through your lobbying efforts and stuff. But life moves at a snail's pace, and for our generation, a snail's pace is too slow. People want to see things now, so we have to figure different means to make noticeable changes. And so I'm hoping that, people will start to see that giant mass actions can only accomplish so much. It's the little clusters of people doing stuff under the radar that really get in their craw.
Well, how do you think technology, general technology, not magical technologies, but just computers and the means of production being in the hands of people readily, how do you think that has changed all of this?
Well, it's done good and bad things, because while it has given people the ability to make connections that they couldn't, and obviously, as we're doing right now, communicate in ways that were completely impossible even not that long ago, I think we often forget that technology is built, manufactured, and owned and advertised through large companies. I have web access at home, but I'm paying Time Warner Cable. Mm-hmm. I'm liberated, but I'm so I don't want to say I'm a neo-Luddite. I'm not one of those people who's willing to say that technology is going to be the liberating factor in all this, because technology to me is it's like having an aluminum baseball bat or a softball, whatever. It's like having better technology to play the game.
But you still have to be a good hitter.
You can do some things. You can steal a base, you can do some things, but essentially you're still using their products. And it's been happening, for 25 years now, this sort of idea that the internet is going to make the world a democracy, but it really hasn't done that at all. It's just exacerbated the conditions that are already screwed. There's a gap between, poor people still don't have access to these things. It's still the domain of certain people. Mm-hmm. And so and in terms of the readers look, who's reading Grant Morrison's work? Who's watching Kenneth Anger films? I can tell you, is probably not the majority of Americans,
right?
In terms of economics and social positions and stuff.
So again, that kind of goes to the disenfranchised, or those who are already predisposed to the message that Morrison or Anger is presenting. They're already self-selected. Your affinity groups that you're saying. Yeah. So in some ways, you got to wonder: are they just preaching to the choir? Yeah.
Oh, I think they are. I don't think is. I think that's. But are they preaching to the choir out of convenience and just simply that's is it Kenneth Anger's job to sort of make people able to afford seeing his films, or that's not his role or his job, so he's going to operate with what he has available, and that happens to be his audience. Is any, never mind these people, just look at anything. How many things are actually sort of movements that are for, by, and about disenfranchised people? Mm-hmm. That is a condition of society, not media necessarily. So I don't know. I guess, are we arguing about the success or failure of these to actually cause?
No. I'm not. I'm just wondering. It's like, how useful are these things? And I'm just kind of going through this process, thinking about this with you, and it just seems to me maybe the best that these producers can do is better enable their already predisposed group or affinity group, and maybe give them more tools or better tools to kind of manifest in this world, or give them a different way to approach reality and or investigate it.
Or maybe they're just like acting as cheerleaders to goad us on further or something. But again, I'll harken back to what I said earlier. I think pretty much most of us who think at all recognize that in a lot of ways we're often fucked. And that's just it. And so how do we go out? I consider myself a Discordian at heart, and so I know we're fucked. I would much rather enjoy the time being fucked than to not. And if enjoyment to me means getting together with 5 of my friends and, doing a ritual and doing stuff that's kind of, a little on the margin there, that's okay.
Well, I guess I'm not as nihilistic. So.
I know. It sounds, but it's not pessimism, or I don't think it's nihilism or pessimism. I think it's a sort of healthy dose of acceptance. Because it doesn't preclude me from trying to change things. It just means that I don't get disappointed when I fail, which I think is one of the attitudes. I think, again, maybe the people like Anger and Morrison, because they're not political people, they're not purposely going into the realm of politics. I think they recognize the degree of failure that they face.
Well, then what about an artist like David Tibet? Would you kind of put him in the same kind of category?
Perhaps. I mean, I don't know what his particular. I mean, I know what his music like. I know what his ideas are. I don't know exactly what he thinks an end goal would be, or if he's trying to liberate or not, or what. But I don't. I suppose there's probably a lot of people like that. I mean, that's to some degree. Isn't all art like that? We're not gaining anything by it. We're simply making the world a little more aesthetically enjoyable, or hopefully. Sounds hippie as I know. Let's just have a nice. Look, I mean, would you rather go down in a flaming pile of shit, or would you rather go down in a hedonistic paradise?
Well, I wonder if those are my only two choices. But
I'm just saying, look, you said Marx earlier, and I was thinking about what I don't consider myself a Marxist. However, there's something that he said that I think is often overlooked when he discussed capitalism, and I think what he was saying was that when capitalism becomes universal, when it becomes all-consuming to a point when no culture is free from it, when it has completely overrun the entire world, only then can the natural revolution occur to change that. Because capitalism thrives on having people to exploit. Mm-hmm. And once you've exploited everybody, then what?
Right.
But thankfully, for capitalism's sake, people are constantly trying to rebel against it in ways that are quite predictable, and so it's like having a built-in revolutionary. We know they're going to keep doing this, so it's like a game that just keeps getting played. And I think the Morrisons and the Engers are kind of saying, like, there's other games. Maybe we could just ignore them for a while.
Well, okay, we.
I'm being optimistic. I'm being very Pollyanna-ish about it. I mean, I know this isn't. I'm giving them a lot more credit than they probably deserve.
Well, let's keeping with this Marx thing. Well, let's look at these technologies as kind of commodities, and how I guess the thing that keeps coming back is who is producing these objects, these talismanic objects, regardless of what medium they're in. I don't see a lot of people producing them. So in the end, you're still going to have kind of this hierarchy of those who are producing it. We're talking about Kenneth Anger, we're talking about Grant Morrison, we're talking about these other producers. Yeah. We're not talking about Joe on the street because he's consuming it, he's not producing it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I guess there's always going to be this hierarchy of those who produce versus those who consume.
Right. Well, yeah. But maybe there's also a question as to what's being produced and what's being consumed. Like, what is Morrison producing? Is he producing a comic book, or is he producing knowledge? Is he producing? I mean, there are other things that get produced, and one of the things that Marx didn't have at his time was an information economy. Mm-hmm. So his means of his production is very physically based, very material based production. As we know, it's a lot different now, and the production of knowledge is a whole different ballgame.
Well, then that ties back to how technology enables the more average person, or to use Marx's terms, the means of production are now in the hands of almost anybody, or at least it's broader. There's certainly there are a lot more factories in that sense than there was, and in the metaphorical sense, there are a lot more producers. Yeah, a lot more smaller producers. But
the difference too is, okay, maybe that's true, but how many people produce information now? Adbusters had an article a few years back where they looked at what was called the mindscape. Marketers were looking at children, let's say 10-year-olds. What percentage of their information is coming from what corporate entity? And it would say, like, for an average 8-year-old in America, 30% of their information comes from Disney Corp. 20% comes from Time Warner Corp. Another 50, and it's massive. It's scary, but in reality, I mean, this is why I talk about with technology that I don't think we need to depend. I don't think we should look to it as being a liberating thing, because how much percentage of, who is doing tech, who is using the internet, let's say, completely free of any corporate influence, whether it's from the production of the machine to the communication lines to get to these, it's just not possible to extricate yourself from that kind of connection. And so because of that, it's predictable. And so this to me is not the idea of the meme bomb, or the thought bomb, the viral bomb, because